Ethan lived in the city. The noise never stopped. Sirens screamed, car horns blared, crowds of people shouted, their voices a constant, overwhelming wave of sound. He longed for quiet. He desperately needed an escape from the relentless pace, a true escape, far from the towering buildings of concrete and steel, far from the endless, pressing rush of urban life. He yearned for a deep, abiding peace, a place where his thoughts could finally settle. He found an advertisement online. It was for a small, secluded cabin, nestled deep within a place called Whispering Woods. The name itself sounded tranquil, almost like a gentle invitation. The photographs accompanying the ad showed tall, ancient trees. They depicted a rustic, charming cabin looking cozy and remote. It promised him the solitude he craved. It promised a much-needed break from his hectic, demanding city existence. He booked it immediately for the entire summer. This was his chance to truly recharge his weary soul. The drive to the cabin was long. The sprawling cityscape slowly faded in his rearview mirror. Grey concrete gradually gave way to vibrant, endless green. The air itself began to change, growing fresher with each mile. Cleaner. When he finally arrived, the cabin was exactly as the pictures had portrayed it. It was quaint. It was perfectly secluded. It was surrounded by a vast, silent ocean of towering trees. A profound sense of calm washed over him like a gentle tide. This was it. This was his sanctuary. The first few days were pure, unadulterated bliss. He had never felt so at peace. He spent his daylight hours exploring the dense woods. Sunlight dappled beautifully through the thick canopy of leaves overhead. Unseen birds sang their cheerful, melodious songs from hidden branches. He read books for hours on the cabin's small wooden porch. He sipped hot coffee, contentedly watching the playful squirrels chase each other. The silence was golden, a profoundly welcome change from the city's unending cacophony. He felt truly, deeply relaxed for the first time in many long years. But then, inevitably, the sun would begin to set. The forest transformed under the fading light. Shadows stretched long and distorted. They danced like spectral figures at the edges of his vision. The locals he'd briefly met in the nearest town had warned him, of course. "Don't stay out in the woods after dusk," they had cautioned. Their eyes held a strange flicker of something he couldn't quite place. Fear, perhaps. Or maybe just caution. He had casually dismissed their words at the time. Old wives' tales, he thought, the usual superstitions of a small, isolated town. He was a city boy. He wasn't easily spooked by such things. It started subtly. A faint, almost imperceptible sound, like dry leaves rustling gently across the ground. But there was no discernible wind. He would pause in whatever he was doing, listen intently, then complete silence. He told himself it was just the old cabin settling around him, the wood groaning, or perhaps it was merely a small animal scurrying nearby in the undergrowth. He tried very hard to rationalize it, to push the growing feeling of unease away, but the feeling lingered persistently. A tiny, unwelcome seed of doubt had been planted in his mind. It was just the woods. He reassured himself repeatedly, trying to believe his own words. Then came the whispers. They were soft, indistinct and fleeting at first. Initially he thought he was imagining them. Perhaps it was stress manifesting in strange ways, or maybe the profound silence was playing tricks on his city-accustomed ears. But the whispers grew more persistent. They seemed to drift just on the very edge of his hearing. They often came just as he was on the cusp of falling asleep, or when he was reading alone in the quiet, dim living room. He couldn't make out any actual words, just a sibilant, unsettling murmur, disturbing. One evening, as twilight bled into true darkness, the whispers became clearer. "Get out," they seemed to hiss. The sound was close, far too close. He sat bolt upright in his bed, his heart hammered painfully against his ribs. He quickly scanned the dark, shadowy corners of the small room. He saw nothing. Nothing was there. Then he felt it, a sudden cold breath on the back of his neck. It was icy, unmistakable. He whirled around in terror. But he was alone, completely, utterly alone, or so he thought. The air in the cabin suddenly felt heavy, oppressive and threatening. Fear, cold and sharp, began to grip him tightly. This was not his overactive imagination, this was undeniably real. The initial serenity of the whispering woods had completely transformed. It was now a place of insidious, creeping dread. Sleep became an ongoing battle he rarely won. Every creak of the old floorboards, every rustle of unseen leaves outside his window sent sharp jolts of panic coursing through his veins. He started leaving all the lights on, all through the long night. The darkness felt far too menacing now, too full of unseen hostile things. He seriously considered leaving the cabin, packing his bags immediately, fleeing back to the city's familiar, if chaotic, embrace. But a stubborn part of him resisted this urge. He had paid for the entire summer, after all. He didn't want to seem like a complete coward. Perhaps it would pass. Maybe it was just a temporary, intense fright that would eventually subside. He tried desperately to be brave. He tried to repeatedly tell himself that he was stronger than this unknown fear. But the nights grew longer and more terrifying, and the fear grew stronger with each passing, agonizing hour. One night, the whispers were louder than they had ever been before. They were coherent now, chillingly so. "You shouldn't have come here," they rasped menacingly. The voices seemed to come from all around him, from inside the cabin itself. He huddled on the sofa, a thin blanket pulled up tightly to his chin. His eyes darted nervously around the dimly lit room. He felt watched, intensely, malevolently watched. Then he saw it. A sudden, subtle movement outside the main window, a dark, indistinct shape silhouetted against the moonlit woods. He held his breath, his body rigid with terror. Slowly, a face materialized out of the blackness. It pressed itself hard against the cold glass of the window pane. It was hideously pale. Its features were distorted, nightmarish. Its eyes were wide, black, empty pits. A horrifying, silent scream seemed to be permanently etched onto its grotesque features. Ethan stared, completely frozen in abject terror. His blood ran cold, turning to ice in his veins. Then a sound. Tap, tap, tap. On the window pane, right where the horrifying face was. Slow, deliberate, each distinct tap echoed the frantic, desperate beating of his own terrified heart. The face smiled, a terrible, knowing, predatory smile. Ethan finally found his voice. A raw, piercing scream tore from his throat. It echoed, sharp and desperate, through the otherwise silent, listening woods. He scrambled back frantically from the window. He tripped clumsily over unseen furniture in his haste. He was trying desperately to get away from the horror at the glass. The tapping continued, relentless. Tap, 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 louder now, more insistent, more demanding. Then a sickening crack, the unmistakable sound of wood splintering violently, the front door. Something was breaking into the cabin. He could hear it. He didn't wait to see what it was. He couldn't bear to. Blind, overwhelming panic took complete control of him. He ran. He ran as fast as he could towards the back door of the cabin. He fumbled uselessly with the stubborn lock. His hands shook so violently he could barely grasp the cold metal. Another deafening crash from the front of the cabin, louder this time, closer. He finally wrenched the back door open and plunged headlong into the suffocating darkness of the whispering woods. He ran without looking back even once. The terrible sounds from the violated cabin faded behind him, or perhaps he just couldn't hear them over his own ragged, desperate breathing and terrified, choked sobs. Days later, the owner of the cabin came to check on the property. Ethan hadn't been heard from for a while. The cabin was a complete wreck. The front door hung precariously off its hinges, smashed violently inwards. Furniture was overturned, broken. Shards of shattered glass littered the dusty floor like fallen diamonds. Ethan's personal belongings were scattered haphazardly everywhere, as if a wild, furious storm had torn through the small, confined space. But there was absolutely no sign of Ethan himself. He had vanished. Utterly and completely. The only sound now was the wind, whispering through the broken window panes. On the dusty wooden floor, amidst the widespread debris and chaos, one thing was chillingly clear, scratched deeply into the wooden planks, not by an animal's claws, but by something with clear, malicious intent, a message. It was simple, it was profoundly chilling. You shouldn't have stayed. The woods kept their dark secrets well, and Ethan became another one of them. Another terrifying tale whispered fearfully among the locals. Another compelling reason to avoid the menacing depths of whispering woods after dusk, forevermore.